Hello, and welcome to the Homewrecker Podcast. That was the new intro.
Yes, yay!
Cooked up by beautiful, lovely, gorgeous, amazing trophy wife.
So if you hate it, blame me. If you love it,
Blame
yay!
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I've just gone through a range of feelings and emotions based off of the quick 1.5 to 2 second clips of 95 different genres of music in the opening intro that you concocted.
Yes.
Amazing.
I enjoy all kinds of music, and I wanted to incorporate songs that at least say something that represents our podcast. A lot of stuff about thinking, opening your mind.
All right. I think you've accomplished that.
Yay!
Hopefully the audience agrees.
Hopefully they like it.
And their,
I can stand it.
and their eardrums don't get blown up by En Vogue yelling
I
into
love
their
it.
ears like
Well,
mine did.
Hopefully you like it. If not, you can hit that little fast forward button, I guess.
Yeah, skip ahead 40 seconds
Yeah.
if you want. But anyway, yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel right now after hearing all that. And it's like the 5th time I've heard it now in a row because the damn computer that we like to record on decided it wanted to do an update and then restart without giving me an option at all after we'd already started the show.
Yes.
So this is now, what, take 4?
Yes.
Something like that?
Something like that.
Gosh.
Couldn't even get past
Darn
the
it.
intro.
No. And each time I've tried to play with the levels so it doesn't blow my ear. Each time En Vogue just kills my ears. Boom. Free your mind, as my head explodes.
It's a good song.
Oh, it's fine. It's great.
I remember, like, back in the 90s, it's probably when the song came out. It might have been in, like, junior high, maybe. But, yeah.
Yeah, I remember
thinking, like, yeah, I liked En Vogue, and I'm like, these girls are badass.
Yeah, I remember watching the video from that song and being like, wow, they're really hot. I was a teenage kid.
There you
Or
go. They
teenage
were.
man.
They were hot.
I'm sure they probably still are.
Probably.
I don't know. How long ago did that song come out? 20-something years
30
ago now?
years ago? Almost 30 years ago?
Wow. Holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that considered a classic or an oldie now?
I think, from what I've heard before, anything over 30 years old is considered an oldie, but to me, oldies are from, like, the 50s and 60s.
Right, but now I think that's just considered 50s and 60s music.
But I still call it oldies, because that's what I grew up on.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I just didn't know what was the classification, like how long did something have to be around for before it was considered
I don't know.
classic or an oldie.
Well, I heard one day a channel saying, oh, playing oldies, and they played stuff from the 80s, and I was like, what? The 80s?
There you
That's
go.
not oldies.
We're old. We're officially
No,
old.
we're
Our
not.
childhood is now the oldies. Yeah, pretty crazy. Very, very interesting.
So crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, this week, we're going to talk about something pretty crazy, too, I guess,
Yeah.
depending on your viewpoint and how you look at it. The Black-Eyed Kids.
Yes. The black-eyed children.
Black-eyed kids, black-eyed children. They're beings with black eyes that look like kids.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that shortly, but first, anything going on with you? Anything new, exciting, fun? Have you hurt yourself recently?
How did Monique hurt herself this week? Yay! So we didn't do it last week because we got right into D.B. Cooper. And I did hurt myself. But I wasn't going to talk about it. I love your face, thank you. I went through a whole week without hurting myself.
Congratulations.
Our youngest one woke me up at 4:30 this morning. So I get up and I'm thinking about it this morning. I didn't hurt myself. This is awesome. Do we do the segment? Do I just say, yeah, I didn't hurt myself. It's amazing? I don't know. And then, of course, I go to get up. Our little one is rocking in our big rocking chair recliner. And when he rocks so hard, he moves the chair. So when I went to get up, it was much closer than I anticipated, and I jammed my baby toe right into, like, the wooden frame part of it. So I was so close to not hurting myself this week. So close.
Wow.
If we recorded yesterday, I would have had an injury-free week.
This is what podcasting has evolved into now. We're talking about stubbing toes. That's where we're at. So,
Oh, and I got a paper cut on my knuckle from opening a box. But I didn't want to count that.
okay. So anything
The
else?
dangers
going
of
on?
opening Amazon packages.
All right. So moving on. Unless you want to talk more about
No.
paper cuts and
No.
stubbing your toe.
No, I'm good. How about you? What have you been up to?
I don't do anything.
Well, you've been researching for this episode, as have
Yeah,
I.
I'm reading.
Yeah.
But that's nothing new.
Yeah, I've just been baking
Reading,
organite
surviving,
incense. Yeah.
Trying to figure out what the hell is going on today
And every day.
and every day. What is this now? We're in July, and when did this official lockdown and
Was it March?
the Hong Kong flu,
February, March?
whatever the heck the thing's called, the big scam-demic, March was it?
March. Now they're saying, like, push everything out until October. And it's like, you realize it's all going to be the same. The same stuff
I'm
will be
just curious,
happening.
when is the mass population going to start realizing that this is obviously not what they said it was at all, and it's a complete power play to just take away your freedoms and
Mhm.
liberties.
Well, I'm sure there's another one coming around the bend.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? Bill Gates and his wife were on some show, and they said that people didn't take this one seriously enough, but they'll take the next one seriously enough, and then both had like, these sinister smiles.
Yeah,
Like,
I saw that clip.
what do you know, or whatever. You can dive down that rabbit hole. There's plenty of information. But yeah. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've been up to. Not really much. I completely left social media. I think my profiles are still there, but I
Yeah, you're
looked
not
at
really
it.
using it.
haven't looked at it at all in about a week or so now. Where I haven't bothered to go on there.
I've been posting less on our social media just because I haven't been going on as much, and when I do go on, I try to limit for only 1 to 2 minutes being on before okay, that's it, I'm done.
It's so negative. I mean, and I tend to follow people that typically were not like that, but I think this whole thing over the last few months has just turned everybody a completely different way, and everybody's
People are just being completely ridiculous. Some of the stories I've heard, the way you see videos of people acting and freaking out at other people, and I have one woman I follow on Instagram, and she posted a video because she was out in the park to meditate. She was by herself in an open area, and some guy came up to her and started yelling at her for not wearing a mask. She's like, seriously? Because she's by herself. There's nobody near her. Nobody should be coming by her. He went out of his way to go up to yell at her about it. And it's I think a lot of people are very afraid, and they have such a lack of control. They feel there's just no control, so they have to expel anger in some way and take it out on other people, because at least that makes them feel like they're doing something about it.
we have been completely and totally socially engineered as a populace. Everybody is afraid of something, and the only virus that is real here is the virus of fear. That
Yes.
is the only one that is real. There is no COVID-19 or any of this other bullshit. It's all a big fucking hoax. You don't want to believe me, that's fine, I don't care. That's what I believe. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but I know what you just said. You have people reacting like children because they've been emotionally whipped up into a frenzy, and we've been fed all kinds of misinformation and disinformation from the government, from various politicians. You have doctors, you have news organizations. Every day the information changes. You have stories coming out about numbers being inflated, about numbers not being reported properly. You have so much confusion, which is completely done on purpose and
That's the whole
intentional.
point.
And you have everybody, nobody knows what to think,
Mhm.
nobody knows how to feel, and everybody's just confused, everybody's just angry, and guess what? That's prime time to go ahead and start taking away other things that you're not going to notice because you're too worried about this, and before you know it, we're going to be I don't know what the hell our society is going to look like in a year,
I don't know.
but it's evolved so much
Hopefully
since
we're living out in the middle
March.
of nowhere when that happens.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, it has
Yeah.
evolved so much since March. It's ridiculous.
My nickel's worth of free advice, I think that people need to we say it all the time, do your own research. Stop getting your news from one source. Stop getting your news from what you see on the TV, and stop getting your news from social media. Go out and do independent searches, and don't do a Google search. Use a different search engine like DuckDuckGo, or what's the other one you like?
There's the Start page has
Mhm.
a good search engine, which is anonymous. The Brave browser is
Brave
really
browser.
good. That's also keeps all your information private and secure, and it actually doesn't just use Google. You can select other search engines to use because Google. It's been shown now that they they manipulate results and they hide certain things. So it is what it is. I mean, we're in an age now where real information is currency, in my view. Real information, because you can open your phone and find whatever you want, right? But is it going to be accurate? Probably not. And before we move on, one thing I heard the other day was awesome. News is the biggest distraction in the world, and it's right in the name. News. North, east, west, south. News. Just to get your mind going in all kinds of different directions and to keep you off the prize, off the target, off of what you should be focused on. That's what news is. That's what news is for. So if you're watching it, just stop, because it's not giving you anything accurate at all.
Look up to see what bills are trying to be passed in your state. Look around and see what Congress and the House of Representatives are doing. Look around and see what everyone else is doing.
What they're really
laws.
doing, not what they're talking about, but what they're really doing.
What are they really doing? What laws are they changing? Look around and just think for yourself. Don't freak out at
That's
people.
Yeah, that's it.
Don't yell at someone if you see them not wearing a mask. Don't let it be your problem. Don't let your fears, don't let, something someone else is doing be your problem. Just kind of keep moving forward. That's all you can do.
I don't like to tell people what they should do.
No, I just said I'm giving a nickel's worth of free advice. It's advice.
To me, it's just kind of everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not all in this together. Don't believe that bullshit, because that's bullshit. But if we were all just kind of realize that, and everybody was just a little more, I guess, not relaxed, because relaxed is the wrong word, but maybe so confrontational with people that they're not necessarily seeing eye to eye with, we'd be in a lot better place. But that's not what everybody wants. They want chaos, because it's easier to control us that way.
And some people thrive on it. So.
Yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, let's move on, because I could go on.
Back to the topic at hand.
I could go on forever about that.
Yes.
But, yeah, back to the topic at hand. So this week we're talking about the black-eyed children.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I heard about this many years ago.
See, I just heard about it this year.
Really?
Yes.
I've never mentioned this to you before.
You might have mentioned it, but it's not something I would see stuff about. Yeah, I'm kind of new to it, I guess.
I mean,
it's a newer
I guess it's kind of a newer
story
phenomenon, I suppose. Is that
Legend.
the right word? I don't know.
I guess it depends on what it is, because we're going to, at the end, get to our theories and get to other people's theories.
Sure, yeah. So would you like to start off telling us, do you want to go with the initial story?
Let's go. So from what I understand, there's not a thread that shows the very first story, but one of the first stories comes from Texas.
Yeah, it's Abilene, Texas.
Yes, so there's a gentleman, and
Why not say his name?
I'm going to.
I got it right here. Let me just do it.
Brian Bethel.
Yes, Brian Bethel's story.
Yes, so allegedly his story takes place back in 1996 when he was at a movie theater, like a complex, I guess, a parking lot. There's a movie theater in there.
Yeah, that's when his story takes place,
Mm-hmm.
allegedly. But he first posted it onto a internet message board.
Was it 2 years later?
2 years later, correct.
1998.
Yes. So go ahead.
So Brian is in the parking lot in his vehicle, and there are two boys who approach his car, and he didn't notice it until they started tapping on the window. And he said he felt soul-wracking fear. So I'm going to read, this is from a website, texashillcountry.com. The older boy said that he and his brother wanted to catch a movie, but had forgotten their money at home. Could Bethel give them a ride? They assured him it wouldn't take long. They were just 2 kids, and that they didn't have a gun. Okay. Bethel found assurances unnerving and noted that the last showing of the film they wanted to see had already started and would be nearly over by the time he could drive them anywhere and get back. In his recount of the incident, he stated that when he broke eye contact with them, his fear became all-encompassing, and it wasn't until he broke eye contact that their eyes became completely blacked out. The older boy began to get frustrated when Bethel made excuses for not giving them a ride, and said that they couldn't get into the car unless Bethel said it was okay. After that, Bethel tore out of the parking lot. To this day, he's still...
We're not recording. This is fucking awesome. What the fuck is going on?
Doesn't want this show to happen. And it wasn't until he broke eye contact that their eyes became completely blacked out. The older boy began to get frustrated when Bethel made excuses for not giving them a ride and said that they couldn't get into the car unless Bethel said it was okay. Bethel tore out of the parking lot. To this day, he still stands by his story.
Yeah, so that's the first, I guess, publicized or major story that was put out there. That's the first one.
There was another story that I read on different websites about. They had articles. Most didn't get into full details, but I found the original story from Week and Weird. And it's about a woman from Vermont where her and her husband encountered black-eyed children. It's very interesting. So it's weird because a lot of these articles, it's very vague. It just says a woman from Vermont or a couple from Vermont. And they say that this woman let black-eyed children into her home, and since then she's had nosebleeds, and her husband had cancer, and they've had all these medical issues. And I'm like, okay, well, where's the actual story? So I found it, weekandweird.com, and it seems like the woman sent them this email saying, I had an experience, this is what happened. Now, her story says that it was at night, there was a snowstorm, and she woke up to knocking. She figured somebody probably went off the road because it happens, and they probably needed to use the phone. She comes downstairs, and she sees children, and she got this feeling of fear and panic. So she woke up her husband because she did not want to let these children in. So she thought, I'm going to wake up my husband and see what he wants to do. Husband gets up, he opens the door, and they ask if they can come in. If they can come in, they're like, where are your parents? And they said, they'll be here soon. They both didn't want to let the kids in, according to the story, but they decided to anyway because they felt like, it's kids. What are you going to do? You can't leave kids outside. So they brought the kids in. The wife, I guess, was making hot cocoa, and the husband was asking them, like, where are you from? And all these questions. Then he got a feeling of dizziness. She turned around, bringing them the cocoa, and their eyes were just totally black. She said she almost dropped the cocoa. She kind of tries not to act afraid, comes over, puts it down, and they ask if they can use the bathroom. So she's like, okay, it's down the hall. While they're in the bathroom, the power goes out. And then she's walking by to her husband, and she sees them at the end of the hallway. Sorry, that was my timer. She sees them at the end of the hallway, and she got another feeling of panic. And so then all of a sudden they say, our ride is here. And they go to the door, and there are 2 men standing outside almost like Men in Black type description. And they try waving to them, and they don't respond. And they thought it was really strange. The kids get in the car, the adults get in the car, and they take off. She said after that encounter, her husband was diagnosed with skin cancer. And they asked, does he go in a tanning bed often? And she said no, because he's not in the sun often and never goes into tanning bed. I guess the type of skin cancer he had is usually associated with the kind you get from using tanning beds all the time. They also had other medical issues. She suffered nosebleeds. She said she had other health issues she didn't want to get into, but she said that their life has just been turned upside down after letting these children in their home. Really bizarre.
That's interesting.
But I'm going to bring up an issue I have with this story. There's no name associated to it. And I guess
that's your issue? Because they could have put Bertha. Could have been the name associated to it. That made you feel better?
No, I'm just saying it's just kind of weird because other stories you have people's names and where they're from, and this is like from Vermont, but it's just because you hear the story, but you can't connect it to a real person. So it makes me think, is it just a story somebody developed?
So if it had a name attached to it, you'd be a little bit more...
Well, if you can look it up to see if it's a real person.
What if you're telling me you've never heard a story that didn't have a name attached to it before, that didn't seem believable or unbelievable?
I'm just saying.
There's anonymous sources.
I know that. I'm
people
aware.
want to be anonymous, but they want their story told.
I get that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, we'll get into this more as we talk about it.
Get into what more? Names not being attached to stories?
No, whether we think this is real or not.
Yeah, well, that comes at the end.
Yeah, so I'll save my comments for later. I just thought it was like, okay, couldn't actually attach this to a real person.
Okay, well, again, even there's stories you can attach to people, but they still seem completely unbelievable. Anyway, we'll move on.
Okay. Do you want to hear some more stories?
Well, I think it'd probably be beneficial for me, for the audience, to maybe hear a few more stories before we start talking a little bit about possibilities of what these things are.
All right, here's another story, and it comes from mysteriousuniverse.org.
That's a great podcast, by the way. Anybody who doesn't listen to it, that is listening to us. Look at me getting rid of listeners. Hey, don't listen to that. Go listen to this show.
No, just listen to in addition to
but this is a really good. It's a good show. It's a really good show. Well done.
So, according to their website, they said one reader who contacted them with his own tale gave him permission to share the condition of the anonymity claims that he had. I can't read. Oh my goodness, that was horrible. No. All right. So this gentleman said he had been approached by a pair of strangers as he sat in his car along a lonely, remote road in the United States state of Utah.
In the United States state.
U.S. state, United States state of Utah. Probably because they have international listeners and readers. I'm just reading what's there.
It says U.S. state.
Well, I was just saying it out. So.
Just go.
In this case, he claims that he, too, had stopped to take a short rest when two kids, in this case it might have been 3 or more, seemingly in their mid-teens, a boy and a girl materialized out of the night, and as they approached his vehicle. At first he was worried that they were lost, as it was out in the middle of nowhere, and there was no one else around for miles. He rolled down his window to get a better look at them, thinking he would call out to ask if they needed help. However, things became a bit unsettling as they approached the vehicle. He claimed that the kids seemed to be wearing very old-fashioned clothing, although he was uncertain from which era it could have been from. They were both remarkably pale, to the point that they almost seemed to emanate a faint glow from their skin in the moonlight. And both had odd-looking bowl-style haircuts that, for some reason, put the witness ill at ease. Slightly unnerved, he nevertheless called out to the two and asked if something had happened to them and if they were in need of assistance. The boy merely replied, "Yes, please," as the two closed the distance, and that was when he noticed that both of them had pure black eyes like those of a shark. The realization also happened to coincide with a sudden tingling feeling of dread that sort of spread out through his body like ripples in a pond. Then one of them spoke. The boy allegedly told him that they were lost out in the desert and they needed help. He asked the witness to open the car door and give them a ride to the nearest town. But at this point, the witness claims that he was overwhelmed with a sheer wall of fear and the potent urge to get away from there as fast as he could. Yet he also found that he seemed to be unable to move, as if he was paralyzed. He would say this: "It was a really strange sensation. Every fiber of my being was screaming to get the hell out of there. But I don't know how to describe it, sort of transfixed, hypnotized, whatever. Anyway, there wasn't a chance that I was going to open that door. But I couldn't move to get out of my car, to get my car started either. I was like a prisoner in my own skull looking out. And that window was still rolled down. Nothing separated me from that freaky kid's face leering just outside." The witness says that through sheer will, he was able to move his arm slowly towards the window, but that it was as if a massively heavy weight were attached to it. He supposedly had to lean a bit with his body as he inched his limb closer to the car door, and that the whole time the two kids just stared at him quizzically, as if they were somewhat amused by it all. As the witness leaned, he tried to work his arm. He says that something very strange happened indeed, he would claim. The whole time, neither of the kids had made any move to come closer or force or reach their way in. It was like there was some kind of invisible wall where my window could have been. Then I was sort of rocking back and forth and leaning, trying to get my goddamn arm to move, and some part of my clothing must have passed that unseen barrier, because that was when the boy, quick as a whip, snagged my jacket with his hand, and at the same time smiled. I tell you, I will never forget that smile. His teeth, they were like they were made out of metal, gleaming, and that is what I think snapped me out of it, those teeth. The weight that had been holding me down was lifted, and I shoved that sucker as hard as I could. The boy apparently was surprised by this sudden push, letting go and stumbling back with a look of shock on his face. In the meantime, my contact started up his car, not sure whether he soon too would be paralyzed again. When he looked up, he claims that the same boy had somehow appeared in front of the vehicle and stood there as if trying to keep him from leaving. The girl was apparently off to the side of it, but staring intently with a look of anger on her face. In a panic, the witness says he floored it anyway, but the boy did not budge. He would explain. "I tore off, but that kid stood his ground and thumped off my bumper. I wasn't going very fast at that point, but enough to mess someone up, you'd think. But when I looked in my rear view, I swear that kid was getting up and dusting himself off like it was no big thing. I just got the hell out of there and didn't look back. I'll never forget the whole thing. It was like a nightmare, and I still wonder what would have happened to me if I'd actually given them a ride like they wanted." So he basically just hit and run.
So he hit this kid with his car.
Right? He ran over. He hit the kid with the car.
Okay.
Now, I get it. You're thinking it's these black-eyed kids. There's something sinister. What if they had really bad dental work? Like he had to get metal caps on all of his teeth because he had really bad teeth. And maybe you were just freaked out, and I don't know.
Maybe you and your passenger that smoked one too many smokes.
A little bit too much of that devil's lettuce.
Maybe had one too many road sodas.
Maybe. They're out in the desert, maybe a little peyote. I don't know. Or they just were totally
I've got a story.
fine. Okay.
I've guessed. Now I'm going to do some
Yes.
reading.
I'm sure you'll do better than I can.
Words are hard.
Words are really hard.
Words are really hard.
Especially when you're not wearing your glasses.
I asked you if you'd like me to read. All right. I'm going to be reading from the book, The Black-Eyed Children. I've got a first edition here by David Weatherly. It's actually pretty cool. A lot of interesting stories in here. So this one is, this is a story that his friend told him before he was even researching the book, or before he was even researching or decided to write a book about this topic. So this is, the gentleman's name is Paul. His last name he did not want given, and he wanted any personal details about who he was not given, because obviously he wants to keep his anonymity. But there's a name attached to him, Monique, Paul. So let's see if you find this one a little more credible or easy to swallow, because there's the name Paul attached to it.
Okay, but this is somebody who, if they're writing a book and they say they actually know the person, compared to somebody just sending an anonymous email that you can't trace back to see if it's true or not.
So, let's begin with Paul's story.
Let's.
So, Paul was not a small man. He stood around 6'3", looked like a linebacker. He lifted weights on a regular basis, actively trained in the martial arts. He had also been in the service when he was young, and he'd worked for years as a prison guard. So this was a guy who was used to intense situations, and I'm only bringing this up this background, just to kind of help to illustrate one of the things that people feel when they encounter these black-eyed children, which is terror, fear, and they just don't know what to do. All right, so Paul lives in the Midwest, right? So he is standing in his kitchen, and he hears a knock at the front door. He had the house to himself that night, by the way. He has at the time he had a son, and I don't know if he still lives or not, but that's just a detail. He was home alone this evening. So he's standing in the kitchen. He heard a knock at the front door. At first, I wasn't even sure it was a knock, says Paul. It was kind of soft and continuous, and I thought maybe it was just some of the noise from outside. I just kept making my food and ignored it for a few minutes. Then it got louder, and I knew it must be someone knocking at the front door. It was odd, he thought, that the person didn't ring the doorbell. Paul left his food on the counter and approached the front door. He looked out of one of the small side panel windows on the door's frame. Paul saw two young boys on the porch. He guessed from their size that they were between 12 and 14 years old. He opened the door and looked at the kids. They weren't children from his neighborhood because he knew all of the local kids. The boys were dressed in similar fashion, both wearing hoodies and jeans. One boy's top was gray and the other's was a dark brown. The boy in brown stood slightly behind the boy in the gray hoodie, and they both held their heads tilted downward. I thought something was odd about the scene, and neither child said anything when I opened the door. They just stood there with their heads down like you do in the rain, but it wasn't raining. Paul broke the silence. "Can I help you?" he asked. He expected a sales pitch. Perhaps the kids were fundraising for school or selling magazines. Maybe they just had the wrong house. What he didn't expect was the response that he received. The lead boy in gray kind of smiled and replied, "Hey, we just wanted to stop in for a bit." Paul was puzzled by the odd reply. "It's almost like I didn't understand the statement," he says. "I knew these boys weren't friends of my son's because I knew my son's friends, and he was much younger than these two anyway." After a moment, Paul responded to the boys. "Do I know you guys? I think maybe you got the wrong house." The boys didn't react to Paul's comment. After a moment, the lead boy spoke again. "Oh, well, it's getting kind of late. Can we come in for a bit?" It was another odd response, and Paul wasn't sure what to think about the situation. "Something was causing the hair on the back of my neck to go up," he recalls. "I felt like this kid was ignoring me and focusing on me all at the same time. It just made no sense. Why in hell would a couple of kids show up at a stranger's door and want to come in?" With his internal alarms going off, Paul began to look at the kids more closely. It was early evening and the porch light was on, so he shifted his stance to get a better look at their faces. He wanted to know exactly who these boys were and what they were up to. It was then that Paul realized with a shock that the boy's eyes were solid black. There was no white of the eye, says Paul. I've thought about that sight ever since. They didn't have on any kind of glasses or anything else. That was their natural eyes that I saw. The lead boy looked up directly at Paul and spoke again. This time his voice was more insistent and he suddenly seemed more threatening. It would be good if you just let us come in now. You don't have to think about it. Just open the door some and ask us in. Paul felt rooted to the spot. His brain was trying to process what was happening. I didn't feel like I could move. I was a little dizzy and had kind of a numb feeling. I started thinking that maybe I should just let them in. After all, they were only a couple of kids. Paul is not sure how long he stood there. He felt locked in the moment, trying to make his body move. The same voice spoke once more. It's okay. This won't take long. That comment jerked me into action, Paul states. All of a sudden, I felt my fight or flight response kick in and it got me moving. Even though Paul towered over these two boys, his response was one of fear. He slammed the door shut, shouting at the boys to get off his porch as he did. Last thing I saw as I was slamming the door shut was those two boys looking at me. Two sets of those creepy, solid black eyes just boring a hole in me. With the door closed, Paul leaned against it. I felt like I had to hold it shut, he states. He locked the deadbolt and stood quietly, trying to calm himself. His adrenaline was still rushing and he felt short of breath. Then came the knock. It was a long, steady knock on the door, soft at first, just like I had heard to begin with. Those damn boys still wanted in. I realized I'd been squeezing my eyes shut. I opened them and looked around the room. It's like I just didn't know what to do. I think I fought the urge to run at that point. My brain was telling me it was my house and I wasn't running from kids, but another part of me just wanted to hide. Paul turned and slowly backed away from the front door. He stopped partway across the room and stood there looking at the entrance to his home. The knocking stopped. Paul felt a cold chill come over him. There, staring in through the side panel window, was the face of one of the boys. His black eyes looking into the living room, staring straight at Paul. They made eye contact and the boy raised a hand, tapping on the glass as he peered inside. Paul took a deep breath, feeling anger rise up. I'd had enough. No one was going to invade my home or make me feel afraid like that. I ran into the bedroom and retrieved my pistol from the nightstand. I was determined to scare these punk kids off my property. Paul put a clip in his gun and rushed back to the living room. He flung the front door wide open, stepped out on the porch, determined to face the strange kids. They were nowhere in sight. It was the weirdest thing. The porch was empty, but I know it had only taken me a couple minutes at the most to grab and load that pistol. I searched the front and back, the driveway, garage, and I even went up and down the street. There was no sign of those black-eyed boys anywhere. Paul couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the two strange kids who had showed up on his doorstep. He walked the house constantly, checking the doors and windows. Next day, he was off, and he made it a point to speak to his neighbors, find out if any of them had seen the kids. No one else reported any sign of unusual boys or strange kids in the area. For a long time, I didn't tell anybody what I'd seen. They'd think I was nuts. Heck, I thought maybe I was nuts at first. I know what I saw, though. Weeks later, I was still thinking about it. I couldn't talk to my wife about it because I didn't want her to worry about anything, especially with a young child at home. I even asked a friend of mine who was a doctor if it was possible for someone to have solid black eyes. He just laughed and said, no, that didn't happen. Finally, one day I decided to look on the internet and I found a couple of stories. Turned out other people had seen black-eyed kids before. I couldn't read that stuff, though. It was enough to know that someone else had seen them and that I wasn't crazy, but at the same time it disturbed me because it sort of confirmed that these things were out there. Paul sat back, finished with the story, and that's pretty much it. He concludes by saying that it's those eyes. I've never been able to really get them out of my head. So, yeah, I thought that was a neat story.
Yeah, so, I mean, basically these stories all say that they felt fear, this overwhelming fear. They felt terrified.
But not right away. Not right away. And it's some of the stories, that sense kind of kicks in after a few minutes or after the kids or whatever they are talk. And then that some people report they'll get lightheaded.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very just
It is.
strange.
Now, we had a conversation before we started recording. You told a story about a woman. Her story, she was in Walmart.
Yeah, but it wasn't a kid.
It wasn't a kid, it was a man.
Yeah,
So tell that story really quick.
I'll tell really quick. Yeah, so allegedly this woman was in a Walmart in Michigan, she was standing at the checkout line, and there was a gentleman in front of her, and then the man in front of that guy was paying. He had his stuff on the cart to pay, and she kind of glanced at me, turned and looked at her, and she noticed that he had solid black eyes. And she immediately, like, her reaction must have been, oh, shit, whatever. She obviously, as we say in the wrestling business, she sold it. And so she couldn't hide her reaction, and he could sense that that she had noticed him, I guess. And so he got an item off of his cart, because she was there with her young son. And he got an item off the cart, off the belt, and handed it to her. It was a Spider-Man clock. But the best part of the story, the weirdest part, is she says that when he handed her the Spider-Man clock, he didn't go around the person that was in between them in line. He handed it through the person.
I thought it looked like he handed it through.
No, he went through the person. So he, like, reached through this person, metaphysically went through him and handed her the clock. And she said that she didn't want to take it, but she felt she had to. She couldn't explain it, but she took it, and he paid and walked away. And that was it. And she just was freaked out by the whole thing, but didn't know what to do. She was in shock. But that wasn't a kid. It was a man.
It was a man. And one of two things, he could have either had contacts on to give that effect, and some people actually tattoo the whites of their eyes, so it can look like they have black eyes. So it's possible if it's one of the two, and he probably sometimes sees people get freaked out. So the guy was probably trying to be really nice.
It's not the black eyes about that story. It's the he reached
I'm
through
getting there.
the person.
So she says that it looked like he reached through the person. Even if he could reach through the person, how would the Spider-Man clock go through the person?
This is a supernatural entity.
Okay. The guy probably just, instead of going around, went through the guy's arm or something, trying to be discreet. Who knows?
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I know,
I
I'm
think
just
the story
saying.
is complete horseshit.
Yes.
But I'm just saying, maybe it was a supernatural entity. I'm probably disappointed to people right now. I think the story is horseshit. But I do. I think that when you hear stories like that, and that's one that I read in the book as well, and that one, that book here, I'm not going to read the story now,
No.
but because I just told it. It's literally like a paragraph and a half in this book called The Black Diary by Nick Redfern. And this book has stories about men in black, women in black, black-eyed children, and dangerous books.
So let's
Pretty fun read.
Let's talk, because you mentioned Men in Black.
Yes.
That's something that these kids have been, I guess, compared to in a sense.
Yeah, theories. Some people think that they're related in some way.
And some people have said the parents who come for the kids, when they've seen it, look like, they don't say they look like Men in Black, but the description they give
Kind of
sounds like a
fits.
description of Men in Black.
So why don't we talk about the characteristics of the kids
Yes.
first of all? So we have obviously the most notable thing is the eyes are completely black. So they have completely black eyes. That's pretty crazy, weird. I don't know how you explain it.
No, a lot of the stories say that their style, their hair, their clothes look outdated.
I was talking about the eyes first.
Sorry.
Nice. What do you think is up with those eyes? If this is a legit thing, how do you explain? Do you think these kids tattooed their eyes black?
No,
What do you think?
it's possible they could have contacts trying to scare people.
Okay.
I think especially with like the older kids. I mean, if
Alright.
you look at it from a criminal psychology point of view, you hear about this story of, black-eyed kids and everyone's afraid. You can buy these kind of contacts on the internet, and you can pop them in, and then you can go out, and people aren't really going to go after you per se. They're not going to give a description of you. Oh, it was a teenager with this color hair, this, that. It's going to be, it was a black-eyed child. It was black-eyed kids.
So you think it's contact lenses?
I'm saying it could be, but I question some of these stories. Is it just something made up?
All right. Well,
We'll
let's
get
move
into
on
that.
to some of their other characteristics that you just jump all over the place with stuff. You mentioned their clothing.
Yes.
Usually earthy kind of colors. A lot of people
Dark.
described it that they seem like they're trying to blend in but are failing miserably.
Which
Clothes
I guess you
are-
could compare it to Men in Black too.
Yeah. Clothes are loose fitting, almost too big. One story I read described it as though these kids maybe looked like they got their clothes from like the Salvation Army or from a shelter, and that was just the only sizes that they had that were even close to them, but they were still not big enough to fit in them properly. Some described it as the kids maybe were malnourished, but couldn't really tell because their clothes were so baggy. You couldn't tell if that's why they were so baggy or what. But and a lot of times you hear too that their skin is either ashy white or really pale or sort of olive skin. Everybody.
Words are hard.
Wow.
I
Olive
tell ya.
skin. My goodness.
Yes.
Jeez. You keep hitting me.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be close
I'm
to
like,
you.
are you trying to give me a signal for something? Like,
That's
what's
fine.
going
I'm
on
just
here?
trying to touch you.
Am I saying something that's inaccurate? Because the way you're doing it, it's almost like you're trying to get my attention. Like, what?
No,
Okay, that's
I
fine.
love you.
All right, I love you too. What else? Their ages seem to range from between, like, I guess as young as 8 or 9, all the way up to 14, 15 years old. That's what I've
And
seen.
so I've seen some stories where they said they look more like 16.
I mean, that's all subjective too.
Yeah.
Somebody that looks like they're 16 to one person might look like they're 12 to me. It's all subjective.
This is
but
true. Yeah.
This is what's been reported.
What else for characteristics? The hair, a lot of bowl haircuts.
Yeah. Old haircuts or shaggy type hair.
Yeah.
So they don't look like they're kept very well, I guess.
No.
They've all got COVID haircuts. Or COVID hairstyles, I should say.
Yes.
Quarantine.
The
cuts.
at-home
Yeah.
haircuts.
And the other thing I noticed too in a lot of the stories where they're appearing in people's houses is they knock. They don't use the doorbell. They never ring the freaking doorbell. And that's it. And I mean, in the story I just read about Paul, that was one of the things he first mentioned when they ring the doorbell. But that's what everybody says that encounters them allegedly in their houses or at their houses. So yeah, it's just kind of another strange thing. Like, why wouldn't they ring the doorbell? Do they maybe not know what the doorbell is?
Is there something with the wiring, the electricity to make it zapped?
Who knows?
They also say that, like, they basically ask to be let in. So
Yes, that's another thing, which leads some people to theorize, are they vampires? Because you have to let them in. They can't just walk in. You have to ask them or invite them in. You have to be the one that says, come in, or allows them to enter. And they get kind of insistent about it, too, by all the stories that I've seen. Because there's a bunch of stories out there. It's not, we just gave you a small taste.
Well, the story you had read, it won't take long. What won't take long? Me letting you in? Like,
yeah, it's kind of weird the way that they respond to people. And they get kind of demanding.
one thing I read, somebody
In some
said
cases.
that the way they speak is if they have, like, a limited vocabulary. They kind of have their lines they know to say, and that's really it, because they'll repeat themselves.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. So, I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell, that's pretty much the children,
Black-eyed
with black
children.
eyes, the
Yes.
black-eyed kids. But people, yes, see, I've got the Men in Black,
Yes.
and they're meshing together now in my head. But yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people equate the two and try to draw a connection between the two in some way. And so I wonder if maybe when we talk about the Men in Black episode, if there's some kind of a supernatural being, maybe
Another dimension.
an interdimensional type being or something that's showing up. Who knows? Anything's possible.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. It just makes it so hard because this is something that kids could easily pull off if they wanted to scare people.
Yeah, you could.
My only thing is, like, the problem is kids could really get hurt when they do that, trying to go into strangers'
Do you
houses.
think that kids think of that?
No,
if that's
they
what this
don't.
is? Do you
They
think
don't.
that if it's a kid out Is that this generation's version of doorbell bitch, going and knocking on doors with black contact lenses and dressing in baggy clothing to try to scare people and get them to let you in your house? Is that what this is?
Some people have speculated that they're aliens.
Yeah.
Demons.
I'd go with that one just because of the sense of dread people feel.
You know what? I'm thinking now it could be like the jinn. Because jinn were thought to be shapeshifters, but there's always something off about them that's not quite right. So, could it be jinn? Because a lot of people, when jinn come by, they do get that sense of fear. They feel like something's wrong, something's off. It's possible. I mean, sometimes like they can put an illusion to make you like think everything's good, and then they want to scare you. They get like all happy when they feel your fear. So maybe it could be jinn. It's possible.
That is another theory. Could very well be what this is. I don't know. I don't know what this is. I do know what I think.
What do you think?
But I can't say for sure, obviously, because I've never had this type of an experience. Now, before I get into what I think, if it is something that is like, kind of like what the Slender Man is, where it's something that started online and more people learned about it and started thinking about it. Could it be something that manifests itself as this form that people are envisioning what these things look like? And a lot of these stories have artist depictions. Nobody's actually ever caught one on camera. Nobody's ever filmed one. Actually, that's not true. Nobody has ever gotten one to show up on camera, but people have. For example, we have what's that doorbell? We have like the Ring doorbell, right? We have that, and you can talk through it, you can see through it, you get recordings of people that have rang your doorbell and you've had a conversation with. People have those videos, and it's them talking to thin air, and no other audio. But they say they were talking to black-eyed kids. So are these people having hallucinations?
Are they just faking it to say they have a video?
Are they faking it, like you said? Possibly, could be. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of strangeness with this whole thing. But yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention.
So like a collective consciousness kind of growing because now that people are thinking about it, it's becoming real.
And I'm going to kind of sidebar a little bit, but it connects, I promise you. We are all suggestible, right? The human mind and collective consciousness is something that has been studied, and the CIA recently declassified documents about what they believe the collective consciousness is and all the different research they've done into it. I'm going to try to find those and get a link up for that. But I'm wondering, as suggestible as the human mind is, as suggestible, and people can be hypnotized, and they can be we have regression therapy done and hypnotherapy and those kind of things, and come back with memories of things that they never had before, but they can be planted in there by a therapist or a hypnotherapist or whatever. I'm wondering if there's some kind of a mechanism in our mind that can maybe manifest things for us to see that maybe other people can't see, or that maybe aren't really there, but we're seeing them. And I say, my UFO sighting that I had back in 2006, I was sitting all alone in a vehicle on a lunch break, and I'm listening to Coast AM about UFOs, and 5 minutes later, as I'm listening to a show about UFOs, I'm looking up in the sky and I see a UFO. Coincidence? Or is my mind playing tricks on me, and I'm thinking that this is what I'm seeing now, even though I observed it for a long time, shut off the podcast, got out of my vehicle, looked at it, tried taking pictures of it and all that kind of stuff. Did I really see something? Or was my mind, getting something to show up for me because I wanted to see this so bad? I've always wanted to see one, and now all of a sudden here it is. I always questioned that myself. And then when you hear these kind of stories, it makes me wonder, is that what's going on? Are people now, again, if you're in a stressful time in your life, or you have some kind of health issues going on, or maybe there's so many different reasons for these kind of things to take place and these things to happen. Is that what's going on, perhaps, with some of these stories?
I think it's possible.
when we hear about people that say they've had health issues after the fact,
Well,
it's incredible. I know that people try to tie those two together, but I'm sorry, that's incredibly careless to connect those two, I think, in my opinion.
well, I think the point is trying to say, like, there was a radiation exposure of some. Kind of like when people have contact with UFOs and there's that radiation.
Supposedly. But I don't know. I think that's it's kind of a stretch to try to tie the two together, and especially where not every story seems to have those similarities. Mm-hmm. There's only a couple that I've seen where people think that maybe this is what it is. I think maybe people are just having some bad circumstances in their life and they're trying to tie it to something. They're just trying to attach to something.
I mean, is it possible that it's because of that? It could be.
It could be.
Depending on what it is. I don't know.
But that's my biggest thing is I think possibly that is something that people have theorized. It's some kind of a tulpa, some kind of a spirit that's manifesting itself as this form because this is what people have now collectively imagined into existence.
Possibly.
So that's another theory that's out there.
So what exactly do you think, though?
I think it's an urban legend. I think it's all bullshit. That's what I think. Until I see one myself, and even then, I'm going to question it. I'm going to think: is it what I thought the UFO might have done?
Possibly.
Is it because I've been now researching this? Because there have been people that have said that they were reading stories about this, they were listening to shows about this, and then they saw it. Okay, did you see it because you really saw it, or because
it was in your mind?
It was in your head. I don't know. And it again, getting into if it is some kind of a spirit or entity that's taking this form. Obviously, it's a malicious form, right? And demonic. I don't know how I feel about that whole aspect of it, but it's funny that it's whatever it is. If this is a legit thing, that it's taken the form of a small child because. And adults are usually the ones that see them. As an adult, if you see a small kid, you're going to think it's an unassuming, innocent creature.
Well,
it's not going to hurt you.
If the kid is alone, your instinct should be to go help them.
Even if there's two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your instinct is to help, exactly. Yeah. So your guard is almost instantly let down when you see something like this. You go, oh, it's a little kid, where's his parents? It's the first thing I would think. It's what most adults would think. Where's the kid's parents? Why is it knocking on the door?
I'd be like, stay right there, getting like sage and like Palo Santo, burning it, like trying to club. How does this make you feel right now?
And they're sitting there and they're asking you to let them in, or they're insisting maybe like, this won't take long. And you start saying stuff like that. It's like, wait, what?
What's not going to take long?
But then when you see the eyes, it's like, what the? It seems like when people start to get that sense of dread is when they see the eyes and they hear the voice and the things that are coming out of their mouth. It's a little weird. I don't know, but I just think if it is something that people are really truly experiencing, I think it's something that's sinister because it is taking the form of a small child because it knows that instantly our guard, our meaning people that experience it, mostly adults from all the stories I've seen, we're going to immediately have our guard let down by seeing it take this form because a small child, anything small is right away you think of it as vulnerable, you think of it as not a threat, so your guard is let down.
Plus, you feel compelled because people have even said, like, you don't know what to do. Part of you feels like you need to let them in, you need to help them, but everything else is saying no. Yeah.
So it's like almost like on the visual side of things, you see things and you see it and you go, okay, well, it's a kid, it can't be bad, but something inside of you, your gut, your instinct is telling you no. Stay away from this thing.
You know how animals react, and like their fur might stick up more.
Right.
They get antsy, like however it is they react. It's almost like that's happened with people. It's just this natural instinct of, ooh, this is giving me a feeling. So it makes you wonder, like, if it's on a really low vibration, it must be a very strong vibration, though, to, like, feel that and pick up on that energy.
Right, yeah. So if that's the only part of the stories that I cannot explain. But I also wonder if all these stories stem from that initial one that was posted on the internet.
Could be.
Is that, because that is kind of a creepy aspect of the story. So that's obviously one you'd want to include if you're trying to tell a scary story. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think straight. I had this overwhelming sense of dread. These are the things that you're going to want to include if you want to make a story more believable, because emotions are what people react to.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think, personally, unless I experience it, even if I did, I would still be questioning it. Like, what was this really? What did I really just see? Did I imagine this? Did I dream this? I don't know. But I think, personally, until we see some kind of photographic evidence, even now, that doesn't mean anything. I think I call BS on it. I think it's an urban legend that's just taken on a life of its own.
Somebody said they got a picture and they circled it, but it just looked like a tree stump on the ground. I didn't see anything. So I don't know what they were circling.
I saw the same thing.
I don't see anything there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. There's no photographic evidence. And again, especially now with technology and the things that they can do, can you really trust photographic evidence in any way? Probably not. It's like that old saying, believe none of what you see and only half of what you hear, especially when it relates to television. Yeah. So, I don't know. That's my thought. I think it's all just an urban legend. I think it's creepy. It's essentially what it's designed to be is creepy. And that's every story that you hear. They all pretty much have the same elements. And if it is something that's real, some kind of a real phenomenon, I wouldn't know how to explain it. I would say maybe something having to do with Men in Black. Same type of phenomenon, whatever that is. How about you?
I feel like most of the stories are bullshit. However, I feel like some of them either are true or they believe that it's true. And I wonder, for the ones that are possibly true, could it be Jinn? It just kind of fits that box.
We need to do a show on the Jinn.
We need to do a show on Jinn. It fits the box of it's a being that usually likes to scare people. It can shapeshift and turn into something, but there's always something off. The one weird thing is, if it's doing that, why is it always the black eyes? Is it because it's different, it's boys and girls? I don't know. It's just kind of weird that that's the one thing that's off.
Well, that's the glaring thing that people notice.
Yeah.
Their clothing is off, their skin tone's off, their hairstyles, are off. So it's not just the eyes.
Yeah, maybe it's Jinn. Maybe it's something regarding. I don't know. I don't know if it has to do with Men in Black. I feel like it's similar, but I don't know. I feel like most of the stories are either faked. Because you have these urban legends, people want to add to it. They want to create their own stories.
Yeah.
I also feel like some of the stories are possibly real, or they believe they're real, like I said, but what exactly it is, I'm not sure. Possibly Jinn, though.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. And if you've seen a black-eyed kid, like, you've had this type of experience, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it. Because, again, I mean, I'm not saying that my mind's completely made up, but that's just what I think at this time. I like to keep an open mind.
I'm open to anything.
Yeah, I can have my mind changed. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a good trait for most people, is having the ability to change your mind and have your mind changed, because if you're so thick-headed that you just, nope, that's it. That's the way this is. If you're that stubborn in everything, life gets boring.
I think for me, it's better to have an open mind about everything, because I used to be really closed-minded about a lot of stuff. It was like, nope, that's the way it is. And, you open your mind, you're like, oh, okay, you start looking at all aspects of everything. It's like, be open to everything, but don't be gullible about it.
Right.
Because I'm also very gullible and naive. So I could be like, okay, that's that. So it's like trying, again, looking at everything and how do you feel about it? What makes sense? What doesn't? Sure. Because it's so often, like, I've had people lie to me, and I'm like, I feel like they're lying to me, and what they're saying doesn't make sense, but why would they lie to me? Obviously, something like this, an urban legend, is to get that story out.
Right, and again, with most of these stories you find on the internet, and anybody can post anything on the internet.
We couldn't find any documentaries on it.
That doesn't mean anything.
I know. I'm just saying it could because it's
relatively-
such a newer thing.
It's a newer kind of thing.
But I'm just saying.
And getting people to come on the record for these kind of things,
A lot of
too,
people
and
want
the
to
fact
remain
that
anonymous.
people want to remain anonymous with a lot of these stories, which again lends kind of credence to my theory that it's just a big urban legend and it's all just being expanded upon by people who are fascinated by it or who want to add to it.
Okay, so I'm thinking about it. Where would somebody take you less seriously if you said I was abducted by aliens, or you said some kids knocked on my door, I had a feeling of fear, and their eyes were black and they were really weird. Like, most people would write off the alien abduction.
Not anymore.
Well,
Not
even
today.
though I think today, even still, where somebody might say, oh, some kids were at your door, and maybe they were troublemakers, maybe they had contacts, you can kind of make an explanation, but I don't know. So to be anonymous, I understand to a point, but then it's like, it's not like it's that bad.
I was listening to.
I mean, in terms of ridicule, not the experience. Sorry, just wanted to have that in there.
I was listening to an interview with a journalist, George Knapp. He's the guy that co-wrote Hunt for the Skinwalker. He was just on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about he had a friend in the government, an informant in the CIA, somebody that he spoke to, and he said, you must be involved in a lot of disinformation and misinformation with the UFO community. And the operative said, we don't really touch that because those people do a good enough job discrediting themselves. And it made sense to me because it's true, a lot of people that are drawn to these type of things, UFOs, black-eyed kids, these urban legends, and these kind of things, are not really, sometimes there's people that are drawn to these things that are maybe not mentally all there.
I disagree
That's
with
not-
that. I don't think that's true.
There's a lot of people that are drawn to it for who knows what reason, but there is so much misinformation and people that discredit themselves that get involved in the field. So okay, maybe I said that incorrectly. People that are involved in it, as far as putting out content, investigators, researchers,
They're
things
not
like that.
all mentally there?
They are. What's the word I'm looking for, Steve? Not mentally there was not what I meant to say. They're not.
I'm like,
they're
I
not,
disagree with
They're
that.
not honest. They're not honest. They're hucksters. They're trying to make a buck, preying on people's
But
insecurities,
I feel like
fears,
that's everywhere with
curiosities.
everything.
Yes, but especially in this field,
Oh yeah, I'm sure there are
because
people
some
who
of the
take advantage.
stories are so outrageous, they're so over the top, and you have the same people that purvey a lot of the same stories. Now, I'm not going to name names because I don't know who's been, but there's been a lot of people that have come out that have been discredited because they've been pushing certain narratives and certain stories and been advocates for certain people that are claiming that they've had these encounters or whatever. I'm just saying that there's so much misinformation in paranormal type stuff. That's all I'm saying. Because
The only question I have to that is, when it comes out that they're not honest about things, they manipulated data to sell books or whatever,
right.
It makes me wonder, is it possible they could have been on the right track and that's why this information came out against them? People tried to turn things against them even though it might not be true because they know that they're getting close to something or they're not on the right track. It's just a carousel. It's going around and around, and that's the issue with this kind of stuff. You can always just spin around every angle of it and say, well, this, but also this.
Yeah, I think it could very well be. There's a gentleman named John Lear who lives out in Nevada, and he was very closely associated with Bob Lazar, with Bill Cooper for a time, and he explained Bill Cooper had what he'd like to call the UFO disease, which is you get into this topic, you get a little bit of notoriety, you get lectures, you write a book, you get a little bit of fame, and pretty soon you've told all your stories, and you have people that send you things and send you research and papers and documents and talk to you and claim to have insider knowledge on things. And after a while, you just start to run with things and say, no, this is real. This is legit. This is real. You get taken in because you are so dedicated and involved in this topic that your critical sense almost is gone.
Mm.
It's almost muted, and you just start putting out stuff, and people immediately go, okay, this is obviously BS. This is provably nonsense. This is provably inaccurate
I think
or false.
it's
And then
possible.
but then it immediately discredits everything else. Because going back to COVID, if one test result is fake, you got to call all of them into question. That's just the way it is. And that same can be said with research and stories about paranormal things as well.
All right, then.
If one thing is discredited that somebody puts out, it immediately discredits their reputation, and you have to call into question everything they put out. That's all I'm saying.
So you're saying that with this story, if a handful of these stories turn out to be false and made up, then all of them come into question.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that it taints the
actual truth.
The actual truth, right? They're tainted by the false stories. The true stories are tainted by the false ones. It's kind of like rape allegations. Somebody that falsely accuses somebody of rape is immediately making it harder for people that actually have gone through that experience to come forward, because that person came out and said that it comes out that this person falsely accused somebody of rape. That's an extreme example, but it's the same idea. You make it harder for the people that actually had legitimate things. You make it harder for them to be believed because you have now discredited.
But if that is a group's goal, then it works.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't know. But where this is an internet kind of thing, the kids part, because there have been black-eyed beings all throughout history, but never the kids. The kids is a more recent phenomenon, where that essentially was birthed on the internet by that one story that started it all. And then more people started to come forward. Now, could it have been a legit thing that this guy experienced? Maybe. And maybe people saw that and felt more comfortable to come forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could very well be.
But I think with that, there are always going to be the people who come forward with false stories.
Yeah, you're always going to have that.
Yeah.
With that.
I mean, there was one story I read, and he was like, a guy said that he got out of the car to scare the kids away, and they ended up like grabbing him and pulling out of the car, and one of them like got on him and was hitting him. So he actually had a knife, and he pulled the knife out and like stabbed the kid a couple times.
What?
And the kid the kid showed like no reaction to it. And I'm just thinking like, okay, yeah, like someone's on you, hitting you, so you do what you have to do. But I'm just thinking like you're stabbing this kid.
You stabbed a kid? What?
Thinking
You couldn't just overpower the child?
I don't know. It was weird. So yeah, there's a lot of stories.
That's
out
the
there.
thing. Like I hear stories like that, I go, okay, it's obviously nonsense.
But there's so many, and some of them sound so familiar, but then there's like one or two little differences in them.
Right. So
It's almost like you took the same exact story, and then you just put your own little twist
you
on
tweaked
it.
a couple of details
Yeah.
to make it fit you. Yeah. I don't know. That's my thought on it. But again, if you have experienced it, hey, great. We'd
Let
love
us
to hear from
know.
you. Let us know. Yeah.
Please.
Because I'd love to have my mind changed. But for right now, I think I'm kind of settled on.
Or
this
maybe
is
there's
probably nonsense.
Other bits of information that don't come out. Who knows?
There could be, but I mean, and again, there's not any documentaries that we could find. There's a couple of clips here and there on YouTube of people telling stories, but
Just let us know.
yeah, let us know if you've got something. And again, the two books that I referenced, I'll hold them up for our viewers. But The Black-Eyed Children by David Weatherly, and he just came out with a second edition of this book that has an additional chapter. And The Black Diary, MIB, Women in Black, Black-Eyed Children, and Dangerous Books by Nick Redford. They're both good. They get good stories in there if you're looking for just something that kind of scare you a little bit. I mean, they're creepy. They're definitely creepy. They're interesting. So, yeah, check those out. But as far as any other kind of resources, there really weren't that many.
Yeah, just internet stuff.
Just various stories you pop up on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would like to reach us and let us know about your black-eyed kids experience, or if you've got a theory that maybe we didn't cover or we didn't think of, you think we're full of it, or if you think maybe we're onto something and you want to let us know, feel free to reach us. We do have a Twitter,
At Homewrecker Pod.
Instagram,
Homewrecker Podcast.
and we have a website too.
Homewreckerpodcast.com.
And as always, you can watch us. If you're listening right now, you can watch us on YouTube and Brighteon.
Yes. And it's Homewrecker Podcast on both of them.
On both of those.
On both Brighteon and YouTube. Subscribe and like our videos. We're also on the Parler app, but I'm having some technical difficulties with it. It's not uploading my images, but it's at Homewrecker Pod on Parler.
That's right, I keep forgetting to mention the Parler app. But yes, we're on that one too. So yeah, hit us up, and we'd love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm. And on iTunes, subscribe and give us 5 stars, please.
Yes, please and thank you.
Show us some love.
Wherever you get your podcast, hit that
Yes.
subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps us to get more visibility, helps more people discover and find the show. And of course, if you got friends or family that you think might enjoy some of the topics that we talk about, let them know about us. We'd love to have them on as listeners.
And it's summertime. You can buy a shirt. You can get a tank top or a t-shirt.
That's true. You can find
Yes.
us on
Yes, you
homewreckerpodcast.com.
can.
We appreciate the support.
Yeah.
Any way you can give it, we definitely appreciate it. Now, before we close the show, do you have anything else you'd like to say to our audience?
I just want to thank everyone for listening, for watching on YouTube and Brighteon, for subscribing and downloading our episodes. We've gotten a lot of new listeners because it's like all of a sudden the numbers jump in terms of like every episode gets downloaded.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think it's wonderful. We have a few listeners from Austria, so hello and thank you. Yes, more international listeners and
Hi,
even
Austria.
our U.S. listeners. Just want to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to everybody for listening and for everybody that's been with us for this ride from the beginning. It's been a crazy ride. It's probably only going to get crazier.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Yes, hopefully. Not too crazy, but
Yeah.
maybe just a little bit. We'll take a little bit. Yeah, that'll be fine. Do we know what to talk about next week?
No.
We didn't talk about anything beforehand.
No.
Probably should discuss this.
That's okay.
So
It'll be a
actually just-
surprise.
Do you want to make it a surprise, or do you
Yeah.
want to just pull something out of thin air?
No, let's do a surprise because I have a few thoughts in mind.
Would you care to share?
Nope. I want to talk to you first.
All right then. So, until next time, I am the Golden Greek, Alex Arion. I've been joined, as always, by my beautiful, lovely, gorgeous, amazing trophy wife, Moni.
And you've been listening to the Homewrecker Podcast.